All right, if you're in construction and there's asbestos on your job site, then one rule pretty much controls everything you do. It's OSHA Standard 29 CFR 1926.1101. This thing dictates the gear you wear, how the work area gets set up, who needs medical checkups, and even how you handle the trash. So today, we're going to break down the big parts of this regulation in plain English so you know exactly what's what on the job.
Okay, first things first, let's get the language right. You're going to hear me say ACM a lot. That's just asbestos-containing material. The official rule is, if it's got more than 1% asbestos, it's ACM. You'll also hear about PACM. That's presumed asbestos-containing material. Basically, for a lot of older building materials installed before 1981, OSHA says you have to treat it like it has asbestos until you prove it doesn't. It's a guilty until proven innocent approach, and it's all about keeping you safe.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at who and what this rule actually covers. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty numbers, the exposure limits. After that, we'll spend some real time on the 4 classes of asbestos work, because that's really the heart of this whole thing. And then we'll wrap up with how your employer has to check the risks, the controls they have to use, and the training and medical stuff you are absolutely entitled to. All right, Section 1. Let's start with the most basic question. Does this rule even apply to your job? Well, the short answer is, if you're doing construction work and you might disturb asbestos, then yes, it's for you. And it's not just for the special abatement crews, it's for everyone on that site.
And when I say everyone, I mean the scope here is huge. Of course, it covers the big stuff like demolition and asbestos removal. But look closer, it also covers everyday repair, renovation, and alteration. So, if you're a plumber, an electrician, or an HVAC tech, and your job means you have to cut into a wall that's got ACM, you're covered. This rule applies to subcontractors, emergency cleanup crews, and even the folks doing basic housekeeping.
Okay, let's talk numbers. These are the legal limits for how many asbestos fibers are allowed in the air you breathe. They're called permissible exposure limits, or PELs, and they are not suggestions. They're the law.
The first and most important number you need to know is 0.1 fibers per cubic centimeter of air. That's the limit, averaged out over a full 8-hour shift. To give you an idea, a cubic centimeter is about the size of a sugar cube. We're talking about an incredibly small amount, and that's because this is one of the strictest limits OSHA has. It reflects just how dangerous long-term exposure really is.
Then there's the second number, the excursion limit. This one's set at 1.0 fiber per cubic centimeter, but it's measured over just a 30-minute window. This is all about protecting you from those short, intense bursts of exposure you might get when you're doing a specific task, like cutting a pipe or drilling a hole. So even if your 8-hour average is okay, you can't go over this short-term limit. Now, here's something that's really important about the construction standard. Usually, there's something called an action level, which is like an early warning set at half the legal limit. Not here. For construction, the action level is the exact same as the PEL, 0.1. So what does that mean? It means there's no buffer zone. The second you hit the legal limit, all the big safety controls have to kick in. There is zero wiggle room. So how in the world do they measure these tiny invisible fibers? Well, a small pump pulls air from right near your face, in your breathing zone. The standard way to analyze that air sample is with a method called phase contrast microscopy, or PCM. It's quick, it's cheap, but it just counts all fibers that are a certain shape and size. If you need to be absolutely sure it's asbestos, you use the more advanced method, transmission electron microscopy, or TEM. It's slower, but it can tell asbestos fibers apart from everything else. Okay, so all these numbers and limits lead us to the real heart of the standard. OSHA gets that not all asbestos jobs are created equal. Ripping out crumbly pipe insulation is a whole different ballgame than cleaning up a contained area. So they created a system with 4 different classes of work based on the risk. This is the architectural backbone of the whole regulation, and whatever class your job falls into dictates exactly what safety rules you have to follow. Here's the cheat sheet. Class I is the highest risk. Think stuff that crumbles easily. Class 2 is for removing solid materials, like floor tile. Class 3 is for small repairs where you might accidentally disturb some asbestos. And Class 4 is basically cleanup duty. Every single task you do with asbestos fits into one of these 4 buckets. Now, let's break them down. Class I is the big one. This is the most dangerous work. We're talking about removing that thermal insulation wrapped around pipes and boilers, or scraping off old popcorn ceilings and spray-on fireproofing.
These materials are what we call friable, which means you can crush them in your hand. That creates a massive potential for releasing tons of fibers, and it requires the most serious controls, like full containment and air-supplied respirators.
Next up is Class 2. This is for removing materials where the asbestos fibers are locked inside something solid, making them non-friable. Good examples are vinyl floor tiles, roofing shingles, or those asbestos cement panels. They're way less likely to release fibers than Class 1 stuff, but they can still be dangerous if you start cutting, sanding, or breaking them. That's why you still need specific work practices, like using water to keep the dust down.
Class 3 is all about repair and maintenance jobs. This is when asbestos isn't the main point of the work, but you have to disturb it to get your job done. You know, like an electrician cutting a hole in a wall to put in an outlet, or a plumber needing to get at a valve that's covered by a small piece of insulation. It's small-scale work, but the risk is still there, so you'll often see things like glove bags or mini enclosures.
And finally, there's Class 4. This is for all the housekeeping and cleanup. We're talking about everything from vacuuming up dust in a work area to cleaning up all the debris after a big abatement job. And the key thing to remember is that even the cleanup is considered a special class of asbestos work. You can't just grab a broom in a regular shop vac. It has to be done with specific procedures, like using HEPA vacuums, to make sure you don't stir anything back up into the air. So, now we know about the 4 classes. But how does your employer decide which set of rules to follow for a specific job? They can't just guess. OSHA requires them to do an exposure assessment before any work even starts. They have to figure out how high the fiber levels are expected to be for that exact task. This is called the initial exposure assessment, and it has to be done by a specially trained, competent person on site. They have a few ways to do this. They can use objective data from the manufacturer, or maybe air monitoring data from a super similar job they did recently. If they don't have that, they have to take air samples on the very first day of the job. The results of that assessment determine every single safety step that comes next.
And you know, for the most dangerous jobs, OSHA doesn't take any chances. For any Class I work, the rule automatically presumes that your exposure will go over the legal limit. The burden of proof is on the employer to show with air monitoring that it won't. If they can't prove it's safe, they have to use the highest level of protection, period. For Class I, the default setting is always danger.
Okay, so the assessment is done, and it shows there's a risk of exposure. Now what? This brings us to the hands-on practical stuff, the actual methods you use to control the dust and stay safe. This is the how-to section of the standard.
OSHA says your first line of defense must always be engineering controls and safe work practices. That means stopping the fibers from getting in the air in the first place. The most common way is using wet methods, to spraying water to keep everything damp. All vacuums have to have HEPA filters. And for bigger jobs, you'll see things like glove bags that seal around a pipe, or even full negative pressure enclosures, which are basically sealed off work bubbles kept under vacuum so nothing can leak out.
Now, just as important as what to do is what not to do. The rules are crystal clear on this. You are never, ever allowed to use compressed air to blow dust around. You can never dry sweep or dry shovel asbestos waste. And your employer can't use employee rotation, swapping people in and out of a hot zone to try and meet the exposure limit. You have to control the hazard at the source. When the engineering controls just can't get the fiber levels low enough, or for any Class 1 job, your employer has to set up a regulated area. And at every single entrance to that area, there has to be a sign with these exact words on it. This isn't just a suggestion, it's a legal barrier. Only authorized people with the right training and gear are allowed inside. And that brings us to our last section, which is all about your rights. It's about your right to know the risks and your right to be medically protected. Because having the right equipment is one thing, but you also need the knowledge to use it safely and the medical okay to do the work. OSHA lays out a tiered training system, and it makes perfect sense. The more risk, the more training. So a Class 4 worker just doing some cleanup might only need a 2-hour awareness course, but a Class 3 maintenance worker? They need 16 hours. If you're doing high-risk Class 1 or 2 work, you need at least 32 hours of training. And the competent person supervising that job needs a full 40-hour course. Plus, everyone needs a refresher every single year.
And finally, there's medical surveillance. If you're working a Class 1 or 2 or 3 job for more than 30 days a year, or if you have to wear a negative pressure respirator for any reason, this is for you. Your employer has to provide a medical program, at no cost to you, that includes a physical and a lung function test. It's all about making sure you're physically fit to wear a respirator and handle the tough work inside these regulated areas.
Look, knowing these regulations is a huge part of staying safe and healthy on the job. If you want to learn more about workplace safety and other key OSHA rules, make sure you subscribe to HSE Study.
So, we've walked through the biggest parts of OSHA's asbestos standard for construction. Yeah, it's complicated, but every single piece of it is there for one reason: to keep you safe from a killer dust. The rules are there to protect you. Which really leaves just one question. Now that you know the rules, does everybody else on your job site? Because safety is a team sport, and knowledge is the most important tool you have.